Did you know that Alteryx has a free licensing program dedicated to helping nonprofit organizations? Alteryx for Good puts our analytics platform in the hands of qualifying nonprofits so they can deliver positive change to communities around the world. There's also the Alteryx Sparked program, a no-cost data analytics education program that provides learning resources for educators, students, and independent learners looking to leverage data analytics skills for their careers. Sounds amazing, right? But how can you get involved? My name is Maddie Johansson, and today we're going to chat with Deanna Sanchez. She's an Alteryx ACE, leader of the Dallas-Fort Worth Alteryx user group, and just started her own business called Nova Geographica LLC.
A big part of my business is that a portion of my time is being dedicated to pro bono work, doing Alteryx for Good, and supporting the Alteryx Spark program.
Deanna has been using Alteryx since 2005, so with close to 20 years of Alteryx practice under her belt, she's full of tips on how to volunteer with Alteryx for Good and the Alteryx Sparked program, including how to program manage volunteers within a user group and how you can leverage your volunteer work to grow your career. Let's get started.
I'd love to focus our conversation on talking about analytics expertise, which, as we just shared, you have a lot of it, and then also talking about giving back. So how you apply that expertise into ways that benefit your community and those around you. So, maybe to kick off, I'd like to talk more about your specialties and how in the analytics space, or really any professional space, you can really benefit from having both the hard and the soft data analytics skills. So can you talk to me about your analytics expertise and how you blend both the hard and soft skills in the work that you do?
Yeah, absolutely. My background is actually in GIS, or Geographical Information System. So I have a degree in geography and GIS starting way back when. My daughters like to say that was last century, Mom. But I began doing GIS in 1997, and my degree is in 2000, geography and GIS. So with that GIS background, that's a lot of data analytics. I've always loved computer science, always loved data and analysis, and always loved maps. So GIS was a perfect fit for me. And that really taught me, even before Alteryx was created, years later, how to analyze data, how to approach data, how to really look at data and figure out, okay, how do I make this run the fastest? How do I get the right performance out of this? And how do I analyze it the way I want to? So I happened to be working at Goldman Sachs back in 2005, and I was introduced to a wonderful product through a company called SRC, which later became Alteryx, and that product was called Allocate. And some of you who are using Alteryx may know the Allocate toolset, and that's actually one of the starts of Alteryx was Allocate back then. And I fell in love with it. As a GIS and a spatial analysis person, I was amazed at what it could do, pulling in demographic data and doing those spatial analytics so quickly, and I just fell in love. I believe the next year it was branded as Alteryx in '06, and I have been a fan ever since. And so Alteryx has really helped me expand those analytics skills, getting deeper into data analysis, deeper into how do I really understand not only data formats and types and storage and retrieval and databases, but how do I utilize that whole combination of knowledge and actually create those true analyses that I'm looking for? And so really having that long analytic background really does help in so many ways as I try to push the envelope in Alteryx now as an Alteryx ACE.
Yeah. And it is interesting. I feel like so many people that we talk to have that background in geography, or they talk about their love of maps. I feel like I've had a lot of conversations about that recently. So maybe it's just like some recency bias happening here. But I do think that background of the history of Alteryx and where it got started speaks to a lot of kind of the longtime users and just the proclivity, I guess, that people have towards Alteryx if they're into maps, if they're into spatial, those kinds of things.
Absolutely, I totally agree. I think there's a whole mindset when it comes to that whole spatial analytics and maps and so on, where you're looking at data, but you're looking at it in an additional dimension, as we like to say. You've got that third dimension there that you're looking at the X and the Y. Speaking of alter the YX or alter the X and Y, but you also look at that third level of that dimension of spatial analysis. And I think that really trains the brain to look at data in so many ways. And it really makes it easy to get deeper into data analytics, where you can do not only spatial, but you can branch out and you can do so much more with those data analytics. You can work for finance, for economics, you can work for municipalities, you can do all sorts of things. If you understand data, then really it's almost limitless the ways you can apply data analytics in so many different verticals.
I think that's such a good point talking about different verticals because within nonprofits, they think about finance and they think about how they're helping their communities and those kinds of things. And I think you can speak a little bit better to this, but there's a lot that you can do with analytics within nonprofits. And I'd love for you to share how you tie your analytics expertise into benefiting these nonprofits.
Absolutely. I think that's a really great question because you're right. A nonprofit itself is a vertical, is considered to be its own industry in many ways. But like you mentioned, and really well said, there's so many different aspects of a nonprofit. There's the finance side, there's the part about the treasury and budgeting and keeping track of all the money that happens with that. There's also the analytics side of what they're doing with their clients. For example, there may be a nonprofit that's helping people that are a certain demographic close to the poverty level, for example. So they need to understand their demographic part of their clients and their base, but they also, on the other side, need to understand their donors and where are they receiving donations from and which demographics are providing donations that are funding their work as part of that nonprofit. So there's a lot of different aspects in a nonprofit when you first start working with them that you start to discover. And there's lots of different areas or departments in a nonprofit where Alteryx is a really good fit. So you might start working with a nonprofit and find that it's the finance team that really needs help with their accounting and their reporting, profit and loss statements and so on. And you can really easily start doing Alteryx with that portion of it. But then you might find there's a department, say you might be working for an education type of nonprofit where they've got a lot of public data, a lot of data that's out there on websites that they need to have scraped. They're trying to store all that, say, in Excel, for example, and they just keep running out of room because there's a limit to the number of records, that you can store. And that's a perfect fit for Alteryx right there, where you can actually transition that type of data storage and retrieval into how do you store this and then how do you make it rapidly accessible in Alteryx? And then how do you get that analytic part of it going for the education side? How many people are graduating high school? How many people are coming into kindergarten in these certain areas? And many more questions. And how do you keep people in school? How do you reduce the dropout rate? And then how do you help them go on to college and stay in college and graduate? So there's a lot of data there that you can actually assist with as well. It's really tremendous the way when you start working with nonprofits, as you do with even other companies that are for profit, you find that Alteryx might start in one part of the organization, but then it spreads like wildfire, really. The other departments go, hey, how are you doing this? How are you making your reports in 2 minutes and updating this automatically? And people start wondering, what is this amazing product called Alteryx? So it's really very cool when you start to introduce them. And my favorite part's watching the light bulbs turn on for the
Yeah.
company and say, wow, I didn't know I could do this. And it's really amazing.
That's so cool. And when thinking about the opportunities that you've had to work with nonprofits, can you share how you showcase your skills to them to land that opportunity to start working with them? Because, I think coming into a nonprofit, let's say I really admire an organization and I want to get involved, how do I get that started?
I think that's an excellent question, and to be honest, I hear that a lot from a lot of people who are
Oh,
interested in
really?
Alteryx for Good. So that is a
Yeah.
great question. Absolutely. It's also one of the hardest parts of actually doing Alteryx for Good, in my opinion. How do you showcase to this nonprofit that not only do you and maybe a team of volunteers that you're working with have the skills to actually do these analytics, but also how do you persuade them that yes, this is free. This is pro bono. None of us are getting paid. This is all volunteer. And we're doing this to help you. How do you persuade them that, yes, this is real? And
Yeah.
that's actually the fun part as well. I like a challenge, and that's always a great challenge. So, one thing I like to do, I've been in consulting now 8 years. So thankfully, got a lot of consulting experience. How do you approach a client? And how do you pitch to that client and let them know, yes, we can actually achieve this for you? One thing I do is I reach out, say, to different contacts. Sometimes the Alter for Good team will provide contact information for me. Sometimes they just have the name of a company, and then I search on LinkedIn and I try to get in touch with different people at the organization. And I start to tell them about not only Alteryx, but I give examples, say in an introductory email, of what Alteryx can do. So there's a great portion on the Alteryx.com website of about Alteryx and different verticals. So if you're approaching a company that does healthcare, there's examples on the Alteryx.com website of how Alteryx works in healthcare. So send a link to that. And that way it's not just you saying, hey, I know it can do this in healthcare, but you actually have proven examples.
Hmm.
And then I also let them know about, say, if I have a team of volunteers, say from the Dallas Fort Worth Alteryx user group, which I have co-led for quite a few years now, since 2015, I showcase their skills. I say, this person has this background, I have this background, another person has this background. Together, we can really achieve a lot for you. Can we get an introductory call going? I just want to just do that brief introductory call, just make a face-to-face introduction and just answer their questions and say, I'm here to talk with you, not trying to sell you anything. I'm actually trying to just let you know we can do this for you and this is free. So that's one thing that I like to do. I also send links to the community where there have been posts about achievements with Alteryx for Good. So they see that, yes, this is a long time program. It's been established. They've been doing so much work around the world for years. This is something that is not new. We can actually implement this pretty quickly. And so I
Yeah.
find that really helps spark that interest. And then we can start that conversation with that nonprofit and say, yes, let's give this a try. And so that really helps quite a bit.
Those are great tips. And you mentioned the Dallas Fort Worth user group that you are a leader of. And I think it's really cool how you integrate Alteryx for Good with your user group. Can you share what you do with your user group and maybe some tips for how you do it and how you get your user group members involved?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's one of the most fun parts of Alteryx for Good, actually. So, starting way back when in 2017, that was when we had really the first Alteryx for Good initiatives going on all those years ago. And so I decided, hey, this is something I'm very interested in. I've always wanted to do pro bono work with Alteryx. And the Alteryx for Good team gave me a contact name at the Commit Partnership in Dallas. And the Commit Partnership is an education consortium. It's made up of over 200 organizations. And at the time, they were serving the Dallas Metroplex and really doing a lot of analytics on education. So getting people to stay in school, how many people are in school, how many people are graduating, how do you lower the dropout rate, and much, much more. It turned out I just asked for volunteers back then. I said, who all wants to work on this Alteryx for Good project? We ended up starting with a team of about 12 to initially do Alteryx for Good, and we would meet in person at the Commit Partnership. And I always love to tell the story of the very first day. We had a couple of hours of brainstorming sessions with our contact person there. We were showing them Alteryx. They were showing us what they do in Excel. In that brainstorming session, we actually converted one of their really long Excel processes into an Alteryx workflow that ran in 2 minutes.
Wow.
And it was incredible. So, and we did that just by brainstorming. It was an ad hoc session. And they were hooked. The Commit Partnership fell in love with Alteryx right then. And we ended up getting them more Alteryx for Good licenses. And I ended up with a team of 22 volunteers overall. So we had so many volunteers that in 2018, I decided to start long before a pandemic ever happened doing WebExes.
Oh, wow.
And I said, you know what? There's people who can't commute all the way into Dallas for these in-person meetings and so on. Why not just do lunch hour, 1 hour WebExes, make it convenient for volunteers, and then people could join and just volunteer, and we would do live workflow builds in that 1 hour. The Commit Partnership would share their screen. They would show their data. They would show, and of course, they have public data, which is really great.
Yeah.
So we didn't have to go through the NDAs at that point. But they would show their data, and then we would chime in. All of us Alteryx users would say, oh, wait, put a crosstab tool here, and now do this. And oh, you need to filter on this, and blah, blah. And we would build the workflow with them in these live workflow builds. And what was really cool is I invited everyone from our user group. We have people who've just started using Alteryx all the way to experts who've been doing it for years. And the really wonderful thing was there were people who joined these in-person and WebEx meetings that were just barely learning Alteryx. And they actually started learning Alteryx just by watching our live workflow builds
Cool.
and learning how these tools work, how do you configure it, how to do data analytics. And it really was amazing because these people ended up learning Alteryx along the way and have some great stories about how that changed their careers as well. But I'll tell more about that in a moment.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a really great process just to do the combination in person and combination WebExes, which was so beneficial. But then I also have tips and tricks about how do you project manage all of that also.
Yeah. I would love to hear about that because I don't know how
Mhm.
many people are collaborating on their workflows on a regular basis. I feel like a lot of workflow builds are maybe more individual and like selecting the tools and discussing it with people. I feel like it would be a different method for a lot of our users than what they're used to. How cool to explore different possibilities and different tools together with somebody who
Mhm.
has that expertise and that knowledge and you can learn from them. And kind of going back to the project management thing, how do you guide all of this through?
Yeah, absolutely. That's one thing that I found is very essential and it's really so helpful. So for anyone wanting to start, say, an Alteryx for Good project with a team of volunteers, the number one thing I've found is it's great to have a point of contact.
Yes.
That's a person who's facilitating between your team and the nonprofit. They need to have that person's name and phone number and email. And that person really becomes the project manager. So there are people out there, who are using Alteryx who are also project managers. They've got a lot of experience in it. There's a lot of great articles out there of how to learn how to be a project manager, of all the different, software that's out there, and lots of different approaches to project management. It's really important to learn those things. But it's good in these Altars for Good situations, even though everything's for free and everything's pro bono and it's all volunteer, it doesn't mean that it has to be unformed or unmanaged. It really helps to have someone be that point of contact and that leader who's going to put all this together. I became that person when we did Alteryx for Good in 2017. I was very happy to do that. And I found that a lot of great things that came together, some tips and tricks I can share, is that it's really essential to try to make sure you are able to schedule everyone and understand everyone's schedules, vice
Hmm.
versa as well. Really important to ask everyone, when are you free to volunteer? I always like to say that you don't have to dedicate a day, to volunteer for Alteryx for Good or months or anything like that. Sometimes all you've got's 1 hour. And as I always like to mention, how many people have built a workflow that changed your life, changed what you did in 1 hour? You really can make an
Yeah.
impact in just 1 hour of volunteerism. And so some people can only do 1 hour on their lunch hour. Some people can only work weekends. Some people can only work at night. So when you start to put that schedule together, then you can figure out, okay, my in-person meetings, because it is good to have some of them if you can be these days and only these volunteers can join. These other volunteers can join by WebEx on their lunch hour. And these other volunteers can maybe do something at night with permission from the nonprofit to collaborate using the AFG license. I do always like to say that with Alteryx for Good, if the nonprofit qualifies, they receive a free license from Alteryx. They do have to go through the qualification process. But then it's that free license that's actually being used. So the nonprofit is allowing the consultants to either advise in a live workflow build on how to build that workflow or some other collaboration, but it's the AFG license that's being used at that point.
Yeah.
So that scheduling is really essential. And again, that way there's not this burden of, oh, I can't volunteer. I don't have 5 days, out of this month to volunteer. It's like, it doesn't have to be like that. It can be just an hour and you can make a
Yeah.
huge impact in just that 1 hour. So, I found it through the years that there's a lot of other tips and tricks to, once you start working with that nonprofit, to really be very efficient at managing the projects as well. And a lot of those are making sure that when you have that first interim or first initial meeting, that you set up those introductions, that you make sure and introduce all of the volunteers on the project, provide contact information if the volunteers are comfortable with that, say an email address, and make sure that the nonprofit knows who's working on what, who's working with whom on this.
Yeah.
But also in that kickoff meeting, it's always good to start that kickoff meeting. And after you've had that first initial conversation with a nonprofit, letting them know that, yes, this is real. We're going to do all this for free for you. But it's really essential for every meeting, including the kickoff meeting, to have an agenda. So you want the nonprofit to know that they're in good hands, that they have someone who's taking leadership of this, who's managing all of this, who's going to really make sure there's an agenda for every meeting, that there's goals for every meeting, and so on. And then the cadence. Are you going to meet once a week, every Wednesday at the nonprofit's location? Are you going to have WebExes every Monday and Friday at lunch? Just talk about your cadence, get all those goals together, and schedule that. And then something I found also, especially in working with Commit, where one project turned into 10, we actually ended up, I loved this part as well, where we had so many different people from so many different backgrounds that you could divide people up into different teams and they would all approach different tasks. So, one thing you can do is, as the project manager, have a list of everyone's skills. Those skills of, oh, they've got a spatial background, or oh, they've got a finance background,
Mm.
and oh, they've got operations background, and so on. Or someone knows how to use, say, Salesforce, and how do you integrate that with Alteryx, and much more. So you can really parse people out into these separate teams based on their abilities. And then you manage that process as well. Just speaking of project management, that's an agile kind of process.
Yeah.
There's the waterfall process, there's Six Sigma, there's hybrids of all these. And you don't have to be an expert in any of those. Just learn about them and learn what project management approach might work best for that nonprofit and for the work that you're going to be doing there.
Yeah.
Many times it might be an agile process.
Yeah.
At Commit, we split into different teams. We had an in-person day, and the teams actually went into different rooms with different people from the Commit partnership back in 2018. And then we accomplished everything we could in that one day with different teams working on these different tasks. And that was so effective. We got so much done in just that one
That's
day.
so cool.
It was really awesome. So splitting up those tasks and managing that, it is essential to still have that one point person check in with all those teams and know if anything is, as we say in consulting, flying off the rails. Is anything not on target to be completed? Are there any issues or any holdups? It's what we call risk management. We need to know, is anything not working? And how do we fix that? How do we get this back on track? So that's something to keep in mind. And also, when you're first meeting with that nonprofit and you're talking in that kickoff meeting, ask about their goals. Ask
Mhm.
about what did they want to get accomplished?
Yeah.
What are their priorities? And are there any kind of tasks that have a deadline? Really important to know, hey, do you need this in 4 weeks? And can we efficiently make that deadline? Because doing this type of work where you're doing Alteryx for Good as a consultancy approach, that's actually where you need to bring to it the mind of a consultant, is asking the nonprofit, where are your pain points? What do you do every day? Where can we actually make things more efficient for you? And as I like to say, one of the most important parts and exciting parts of being a consultant is you might find that there's a way to do something completely new for this nonprofit that no one's ever thought of before.
Yeah.
And because you've got the background, yeah, you can jump right in and invent something for them in Alteryx that they've never even tried. And it totally transforms things for them. And that's one of the jobs of a consultant, as I like to say, because being a consultant is dynamic and changeable and fun. And you can create something out of the blue. And maybe it's something they never thought of. So I think giving those tips and tricks of having an agenda, having a schedule, having a cadence, having a list of goals and timelines. And yes, of course, these are all volunteers. Things can change. It is a very fluid environment. It's not where you're getting paid, for this. But you do want to still try to keep everything as succinct and on track as possible and create these benefits for this nonprofit, these achievable outcomes and these deliverables that they can showcase and go, wow, look, this got built and now we can run all these reports in just minutes. And I did this for Commit. Actually, I remember that we were getting a report automated for them, and I was like, wouldn't it be nice if you had a map along with this? This
Mm.
would be fun if you could actually run the report and out would come a map that shows the school districts also. And they said, yeah, can you do that? And took a little bit of time, and yeah, there was a map added to it. So now you get maps with certain reports. And it was an add-on. It wasn't something that was asked for, but it was something that I was like, oh, that's simple. I can add that in there.
Yeah.
And so that it's really important to keep all those things together, make sure, that they have something they can utilize as fast as possible. So I always wanted to point those things out of the essentials of project management and keeping things on track. And I did also want to add something very important that I made a note on here is an NDA. If you are working with a nonprofit and they do have, say, healthcare data or things like that has PII in it or proprietary information, it is important to talk with that nonprofit about, do your volunteers need to sign an NDA? And making
Mhm.
sure that the volunteers are okay with signing that NDA. That is an important topic to bring up
Yeah.
as well. So just wanted to add that in there if you might be working with any sensitive data.
Yeah. Really smart. Yeah, those are really good tips. Thank you so much for laying it out because it can be I think just saying volunteering with a nonprofit, it can sound a little ambiguous and being able to have those very clear steps, like those are all very doable, if you break them up in that way. And yeah, you've really hacked it to where it's very efficient, especially breaking up the volunteers into their skills. I think that's really smart. And you mentioned the commit partnership. I remember we did a Inspire session with them back in 2018, where I met a couple of people from the Commit partnership, and it's so inspiring the work that they're doing.
It really is. It's amazing. So, yeah, as mentioned, we got them started with the one Alteryx license and then moved forward with that. And they're doing such amazing work. I'm still in touch with them. And in fact, they reached out to me this year as I started my own company. And they asked if I could assist them now with some more advanced spatial analytics and helping them figure out how to accurately store and retrieve their spatial
Mm.
data. So spatial data is a little more extra than regular data sometimes. There's a lot more to those spatial components. And so that's been a wonderful project to start working with them on, just myself individually.
Yeah.
And so privileged just for them to reach out and ask if I can assist
You're
with
the
that, which I'm
perfect
very
person.
happy to.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
awesome.
I'm very glad to. And yeah, they have so many great projects. I remember back when we were doing it in 2018 as well. Our start project, we brainstormed and made that first workflow that ran in 2 minutes for them, pulling FAFSA data, scraping the website and pulling public FAFSA data. But then it branched into, I believe, 10 different projects that we started doing for them. There were projects where we were looking at demographic analytics, using different demographic data and pulling in information of, okay, where are different students located? And where are people moving into the areas? And where are the population growth going on in those areas? That was really cool. And now the Commit Partnership, they just presented at our Dallas user group in February, showed some really cool maps that they were doing in Alteryx, which we actually started doing some spatial things for them in 2018, which was really neat. Showed them how to use the report map tool, how to pull in that spatial data, how to get the data off the census.gov website. There's free data out there for the tiger line shape files. Speaking as a GIS person here, I've used those for over 20 years now, and you can download those for free and get spatial boundaries. And so it's really amazing the things that Commit is doing, analyzing the student population and not only the students, but the demographics of the entire Metroplex as well, and figuring out how do you plan for the future and how do you really impact education on a whole statewide level. And they're just doing amazing work in Alteryx, which is incredible. I think I have a recording, hopefully, of what they've done with the Commit partnership in our Dallas user group. And so I'll try to post that and we can actually see
Cool.
how that worked for them.
Yeah, we'll definitely make sure to link to that in our show notes, but it
Okay.
is really amazing to just see how data is really amplifying the work that they're doing and helping direct it and just really make that impact a lot bigger and
Mhm.
helping the people that they serve feel that work even more with data. That's really cool.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's really incredible. And to see it all happening through Alteryx is just wonderful because you know what Alteryx can do. And then when you see it blossom inside of a nonprofit like that and really impact a community, an entire metroplex, and then even statewide, it's just such a fulfilling feeling just to say, yes, I was a little part of that, just to help that grow. And I will say, I think I mentioned earlier, our one of our co-leaders of the user group, David Raridan, I'm gonna give a shout out to David. He was one of our volunteers all those years ago in 2017 and 2018, and he is now the director of analytics at the Commit Partnership.
Oh my gosh.
And many times he credits that pro bono volunteer work. He just joined on our meetings, and he really got to know the Commit Partnership and really gave his expertise because his background's in GIS as well. And so I love to say that volunteering for Alteryx for Good can lead you down so many new pathways. And it's really, incredible to see some of these transformational journeys of some of the volunteers. We have another volunteer who started back in 2017 and 2018, and he was just learning Alteryx. He was really new to it and it changed his career. And he learned Alteryx. He gives us credit for those WebExes where he was learning Alteryx, watching what we did in those live builds. And now he's doing quite well in Alteryx as a major analyst at a major company.
Wow.
So it can change your career in many ways, and it can change your path. Who knows what can happen just by volunteering? Who knows who you might meet? Who knows what you might do? And who knows what analytics you might learn just by
Yeah,
volunteering?
that's awesome. And thinking about the volunteering aspect, taking advantage of these programs, applying your skills. You're also involved with our Sparked program. So, the Alteryx Sparked program, it's a no-cost data analytics education program that helps educators with resources. It allows students to access the Alteryx platform as well, and then also career changers for people who want to shift into the data analytics space. It provides those learning resources for them. So, I'd love to hear how you are also having that tremendous positive impact on students in your community through the Alteryx Sparks program.
Yes, absolutely. And again, that's a real privilege as well. So yeah, I love volunteering for the Alteryx Spark program, especially starting in January when I started my own business. And so I said part of my time is going to be dedicated to pro bono work. I reached out to the Spark program and was introduced to many more of the members there at Alteryx. They're phenomenal. And yeah, they're doing amazing work. And being in the Dallas area and leading the Dallas Fort Worth Alteryx user group, they actually asked if I wanted to start participating in some very cool things they were doing with the University of Texas at Dallas. And I immediately said, yes, oh, involve me as much as you want. And so I was very honored to not only be there for their career fair day that they had back in February, but also to serve as I had a table for the Dallas Fort Worth Alteryx user group there at their career fair. But I also served as one of the resume reviewers. And so I would review the students' resumes. I must say, they're all highly impressive. They're doing amazing work at UT
Yeah.
Dallas in the data analytics program there. But I would advise them on different tweaks they could do to their resumes, ways they could highlight different aspects, and get them ready for getting out into the real world, starting their career. What was wonderful is that with the Alteryx Spark program, these students participated in an escape room. They participated in weekly challenges. They did a hackathon. It was great because I came on the last day of the hackathon and watched some of the judging that happened, which was a lot of fun. And they're learning Alteryx so rapidly through the Alteryx Spark program, and many of them are getting core certified in just a few weeks, which is amazing because they are really fast learners of this amazing platform.
Yeah.
And then they allowed us to have a Dallas Fort Worth Alteryx user group meeting at that same career fair day for that afternoon. So
How
we had
cool.
students attend, We had many of our members attend. It was a great opportunity for students to meet members and collaborate and start asking questions. And it was really fantastic because then they got to see presentations by corporations and clients of Alteryx. So Toyota presented a time series presentation in Alteryx, and then the Commit Partnership presented a lot of what they were doing in Alteryx. And then Alteryx presented Auto Insights. And so the students immediately got this great overview of some of the depth and breadth of what Alteryx can do. And that really kicked things off for the students at UT Dallas as well, learning how can you get involved with the user group. And with the user group, there's networking. So come and network, come and meet others, come and talk Alteryx, and who knows where things will go next. You never know who you might meet or where your career path might change for the better. So that's been wonderful, and I'm so happy to keep continuing to volunteer for the Spark program also. Absolutely.
That is so cool. And what a great opportunity for those students to hear from an ACE, really an Alteryx legend like yourself. I think that's amazing. And it's checking all the boxes in terms of you're learning for yourself individually, but you're also connecting with a community of other users and learning from other people. So like you're getting that social aspect, but then you're also getting that good for the soul volunteering aspect as well of helping a nonprofit and helping the greater community around you. So yeah, it's really good from all sides.
It really is. There's so many benefits in so many ways. And I've read so many interesting articles of how volunteering and doing something good for others actually improves your overall health. So it not only improves your mental and emotional health, but it improves your physical health. It's really quite fascinating.
Yeah.
So lots of great articles out there of where you're doing something altruistic, where you're doing something where you're giving back to others. It's generating this amazing positivity. There's actually a book out there called Positivity that looks at the science of positive action and a positive attitude. And it actually can be beneficial health-wise for you as well.
Thanks for listening. To get involved with Alteryx for Good, the Alteryx Sparked program, or to join an Alteryx user group, check out our show notes at community.alteryx.com/podcast. Catch you next time.